Good afternoon. I'm Mary Beth Keelty, the CMO of PM Digital. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to get started in a couple seconds here. Today we're going to discuss the recent Google SERP changes, including initial findings, potential impacts, and insights for moving forward. Today we have two of our subject matter experts with us, Valerie Davis, who is our SVP of Paid Digital Media, and Clay Kazir, our VP of Natural Search Strategy. We're only going to take about 30 minutes of your time, so we'll get started right away. A couple of quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature, and time permitting, we will answer them at the end of the session or get back to you after the event. Also, this event is being recorded, and we will distribute the recording and the materials the next day. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
So what you're seeing here is an overview of the changes. I won't go through all of them, only a couple that I wanted to highlight. One is the top four positions. In the case where they're showing top four positions, the new thing with the fourth position is that you'll be able to see some site links. So we'll get into making sure you use those site links later. The other thing is, while Google says there are no changes to the shopping and product ads, we do expect to see a lot of increased potential to show them. Google has tested in the past 6 packs on the side. I imagine you will see those come up on that right-hand rail that is now empty. Why is Google making these changes? I'm sure we've all heard in the press. One of the big things is a more mobile, desktop, unified, richer user experience. Google's mantra in this last year has been to lead with mobile or mobile first, and that's because mobile queries are now eclipsing that of desktop. And we're all seeing it. Desktop traffic is declining and it's being replaced by mobile. Additionally, mobile devices have condition searchers to scan vertically versus horizontally. And we'll get into that a little bit more later when we show you an iStudy. While this change has come on suddenly and perhaps surprised many of us, Google was quoted in Fortune magazine as saying, "We've been testing this layout for a long time. We'll continue to make tweaks, but this is designed for highly commercial queries where the layout is able to provide a more relevant result for people searching and better performance for advertisers." Click-through rates, Google says in testing, have improved. So we'll see if that's true and what we're seeing in our first 2 weeks. Going into the next slide. So everyone has some looming questions. These questions are tied to what is happening to my click volume, my traffic volume. Will I be paying higher CPCs? What will this search evolution do to my efficient product that we've been using for Google, dynamic search ads, RLSAs? While we'll explore what we are seeing in the first 2 weeks, but there are indicators that this is not yet settled. Google was quoted in Fortune as saying that they're making tweaks. Our guess is it's both to the SERP and the algorithm. If we go to the next slide. So here are the highlights of what we're seeing in the first 2 weeks. As suspected, impression loss was significant. It's down 30%. Traditionally, 41% of query volume was served a right-hand side ad. So while click-through rates may have been lower, as Google was saying in testing, they were serving more ads and driving higher impressions. But what Google was saying about the click-through rate in terms of it being up, we are seeing strong click-through rates across all of our clients of 16%. Not surprising, given the higher position, click-through rates will be higher. Oh. The one thing, though, is that overall clicks are down 9%. And so while this has offset the impression, this is not as high as the impression loss, it has helped offset, the click-through rates have helped offset the impression loss. And the good news is CPCs are down significantly at like 21% right now. So these are the things we're seeing in the first 2 weeks across all of our clients. Conversions are down 10%. This is almost as much as the clicks are down. So we're not making any key things tied to this, but we are going to be watching that CPC. As it's down 21% right now, we suspect that this is going to shift a little bit. So talking about what we're seeing, this is Mozcast features. What you're seeing on the right-hand side are 3 charts. One of the biggest shifts that we're noticing, and this is why I say CPCs are down right now, we are evaluating the first 2 weeks, and that goes through about 3.5. What you're seeing is a huge shift when 3.1 hits. So even though the SERP change has happened on 2/22, top ads, which is that very first chart, you see a huge decline on 3.2. If you look at the bottom graph on the right-hand side is the shopping ads. The shopping ads have taken a huge incline on 3.1. So what we're noticing, and we think this is driven highly by retail ads, is that the shopping is taking over the top positions the shopping ads are taking over the top positions and dropping the top ads down for retailers, and I think that's what's driving this change. You're also noticing a slight decline in the bottom ad, and that would be the middle graph. This, to me, is saying for the top ads, we do suspect that there will be starting to see some increase in CPCs. When we looked at yesterday's data, we did see CPCs start to go up again, not significantly to where they were prior to this change, but we are seeing that trend happening. So we will continue to watch this as time goes. So it's still early. We believe the impact of this layout change is going to vary based on the size of the advertiser, the vertical, whether you're insurance or retail, brands versus partners, meaning retailers and affiliates, brands versus non-brands, and then and we will keep a pulse on all of this. We're going to be checking and monitoring and providing ongoing insights and point of views. For now, we want to make sure we touch on the do's and don'ts, starting with the don't. Don't panic. Don't start sending Google hate mail just yet. And don't make any major shifts in your strategy or optimization just yet. Any major changes will make it harder to understand whether the impact of your results are tied to the Google search change or the big change you've made. As indicated in that previous slide with the top ads taking a large decline on 3.1, the dust is yet to settle. So we're not saying don't make any changes, certainly optimize, but don't make any major shifts that would make it hard to understand whether it's impacting performance is the search change or the change you're making. What's things that you should do now? And these are the do's for do now, and I'm hoping everyone's doing this, and I know we're doing this for our clients, is benchmarking, monitoring, front-end KPIs is going to be very key right now. Analyzing performance by keyword and ad position to determine auction strategies for keywords that drive strong volume and performance. I think it's very important to look at this both pre and post to understand some dynamics, and obviously this would be for non-seasonal categories. Leverage the features and ad extensions that Google offers. Make sure that you're creating a richer, more relevant ad experience that resonates with the searcher. And if you're a retailer, maximize Google Shopping as much as possible. It is clear that we're seeing a lot of traffic uptick in the last couple of days. We also want to make sure we touch on some of the potential risks and concepts to consider based on these risks. So most non-branded DSA ads live on the right side hand for advertisers. This has been something that we've used as an agency to really drive efficiency for our clients. We've noticed lower CPCs for DSAs. We are very concerned about what that's going to do as that top spot garners higher click-through rates and people start moving their ads there. Are CPCs going to go up? Or are we going to have to increase our CPCs on DSA and drive what was once an efficient program for us at higher cost? So making sure that we're also looking at conversion optimization to improve and offset that potential rise is going to be key. Compounded reduction in already reduced traffic volume on the existing keyword traffic. The reduced traffic volume tied to mobile shift, we've seen it and we've talked about it. We want to make sure we're researching and testing alternatives. Maybe focusing more on mobile traffic, looking at more keyword expansions. It wasn't too long ago where we started pulling back on longer tail keyword expansions. You may want to revisit that depending on how Google search evolves and what they decide to serve on. Making sure you're increasing your focus on shopping expansion and optimization. So when I said in the last slide, make sure you're maximizing shopping features, also make sure you're optimizing it as well. And for brand advertisers, core brands may no longer be sacred. If your partners, affiliates, and retailers are bidding on your brands, it may get worse. So we just make sure you're watching that carefully. Be strategic and make sure that you're winning as well as your partners. So let's take a longer view. I mentioned a little bit about the iStudy earlier. This is an iStudy that Marketing Sherpa put out a long time ago. They coined the 3 to 4 placements. They call that the golden triangle. I think this makes sense as to why Google, this validates Google's testing essentially. What you see on the right-hand side is there's very little interaction. If you look on the right-hand side of the other SERPs that we're showing a SERP that shows product listing ads on top, local results right below that, and then for a non-retail ad, we're showing 4 ads, all with site links, but then we're also showing a really rich SEO placement for average mortgage rates. So what we think is going to be very important is making sure you strategically approach your SERP in a more dynamic way, delivering an overall richer experience. That means integration creates more impact. So leveraging data and approaching SEM, SEO, social content with a more unified strategy should now be your operating imperative. As advertisers, we also need to make sure we're ensuring a richer overall experience within the SERP. This means leveraging all the features we talked about. And remember, the extensions are being available in Position 4 now. We also need to increase our focus on mobile, keyword strategies, and dare I say, search engines beyond Google. I'm going to hand this over to Clay to touch on some organic findings as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Val. So let's go ahead and dive straight into a few numbers. You know, one of the things that PM Digital was able to do when Google's Mobilegeddon update was announced was kind of level set against a lot of the fear-mongering, the fear, uncertainty, doubt that was hitting the internet, the echo chamber that sometimes organic search can be. So first, let's really talk about what this means to your overall search volume. So for every 100 visits to your site, statistically, 34% is roughly what's going to come from search. That's paid and organic together. Of that 34%, approximately half will come from mobile. This 4-pack announcement for paid doesn't affect mobile, it's desktop only. And so the 64% of the remaining desktop traffic is what comes from Google. You know, we all know that Google dominates the search, and that they represent about 64, upwards of maybe 70% of desktop search. So before we even get into discussing the impact of this on paid, we have to consider how it impacts our total traffic. So it begins to be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. Then, once we consider that which is coming from search, that which is coming from desktop, that which is coming from desktop mobile, we then have to consider that approximately 50% of Google searches even have an AdWords ad. If you take searches like tax compliance or how do I tie a tie, those don't even feature ads from Google. Then of the remaining 50% that do show ads, right now approximately 36% are actually showing the 4 ads instead of 3 or fewer. So again, you can quickly see how when it comes to every 100 visits from your site, if we go to the next slide, the math allows us to kind of see that the numbers are much reduced. So from every 100 site visits, 34 come from search. Of those, 19 come from desktop. Of those, 12 come from Google. 6 actually have AdWords ads, and only 2 of those 100 visits were actually exposed to 4 AdWords ads. So approximately 2 visits out of every 100 has the opportunity to even be impacted by this change, and that's if somebody chooses to click on the 4th ad or avoid organic because of that 4th ad. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, my job is to focus on organic traffic, and so let's go ahead and take that 100 site visits. Out of every 100 organic site visits, what's the potential impact? You know, let's put to the side direct traffic, referral traffic, etc. So again, optimistically, 57% is going to come from desktop, 36 of those 57 from Google, down to the 50% that show ads, 18, and then the approximately 36% that comes from those with 4 ads now. So even then, it's approximately 6 organic visits out of every 100 that most retailers are typically getting today even have the opportunity to be impacted by this change. Now, if you're a B2B company, let's say dealing in information in particular, that's going to be even less because your searches from organic are far less monetized, meaning ads show for fewer of your topics, whereas if you're selling shoes, let's say, far more will be impacted by Google AdWords. So again, the idea is this is a big idea in terms of Google philosophy and strategy, just like their Mobilegeddon announcement back in April was wide-based in its impact, or excuse me, by its application, but the actual impact begins to be minimized when you consider the actual statistics of a piece of a piece of a piece of a piece of a pie. Let's go to the next slide. Now, another thing to think is once we've gotten down to that 6 out of every 100 organic visits that could be impacted, or 2 out of every 100 overall site visits, what will people actually do when they encounter 4 ads instead of 3? Well, first of all, there are people who simply don't trust or click on paid ads. Now, the numbers that I've seen vary, but most center around 80-20 mix when presented with a paid ad and organic. Honestly, most statistics show you that 80% will choose an organic ad and that 80% or more, quote, trust organic more than paid. So ignoring that, though, because I assume that those people won't suddenly be swayed by a 4th ad, let's just say that there are those who would say, well, organic's positioning, their actual real estate above the fold of the search engine screen, with a 4th ad, organic's getting pushed down farther and farther, and so fewer and fewer people will see results. Well, again, let's look at the numbers. So of the screen heights that are the most popular right now, most of them, approximately 42%, are still at about 720 to 768 pixels tall. Now that honestly means, as this screenshot shows to the left, that only the #1 organic ranking will show when there are 4 ads. That's not very optimistic unless you consider, again, that some people simply won't click on a paid ad. Now if we go to the next screen, but when we start thinking about the future, and most screens get bigger and bigger, especially as you go to a technical audience, we see that just over 18% have a 900 pixel tall. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that approximately then the remainder, or most of the remainder, about 23%, have over 1,000 pixels tall, where we begin to see the 2nd and then the 3rd organic placement. So my messaging here is that what's at risk? #1, the organic placement in the 1st spot is likely going to be viewed no matter what. So I really don't expect click-through rates on organic 1st position rankings to be impacted. So most of your brand results are highly unlikely to be impacted through this. Your #2 and your #3 begin to be impacted by the 41% that has a shorter height monitor. Honestly, most of them are not going to be when you start looking at positions 2 and 3, because most people do have a taller monitor. So if we go to the next slide, we begin to think about a working hypothesis that I'll show you how to measure in a moment, which is that we saw that the rollout began in early February, and it's really started to take true effect in late February. These are going to be kind of the cut dates that we analyze. What our hypothesis is that because of all the things I've mentioned, is that your #1 organic position is unlikely to be impacted because of the screen height issue. Your #2 and your #3 may be impacted a very small amount, that 41% of screens that are that short. The positions in 4+ in your organic search results for non-brand, those are the ones that are most likely to suffer what I'll call the laziness factor, which is people who simply don't want to scroll down the page, and therefore they'll either choose a #1, 2, or 3 organic listing, or they'll go against their old habit of clicking on organic and decide suddenly to click on paid. With all of this considered, I would say that positions 4 and beyond, most of the traffic they lose will likely go to positions 1, 2, and 3 organic. Again, it's not as if those people who chose organic over paid in the past will suddenly want paid because of that 4th ad. It's mainly, again, a quote, laziness factor. Now, the 2 last slides that I've got here will show you exactly how to measure this, how to watch it. I mentioned to you that the break date, the cut date, was really February 23rd, when that 36% of AdWords ads began to show 4 ads. So if you go into Google Search Console, the Search Analytics report that you see in front of you, go ahead and specify the device as a desktop. pull your dates for comparison. In this case, I ran February 1st through 7th before the change versus February 23rd through the 29th, a week after the change. And in this case, I excluded, you see the XYZ there under queries, I excluded what were brand searches. And you'll see this is very typical data for what I've seen. Is first of all, I'll call your attention to that we saw a very small amount of position loss, meaning regardless of paid ad presence, there's a tiny bit of a ranking bump, but again, 19.8 average position versus 20.1 for this data set. The average click-through rate hasn't suffered dramatically, meaning again, this is organic clicks on your rankings went, in this case, your average click-through on those placements was 3.87. It went to 3.98, which is, of course, less click-through, and it's approximately proportionate to the little bit of average position loss. Let's go to the next slide. Now, at the top, you see two more pieces of sample data. These are sample clients from some of our listings. Again, on the top left, we saw our average click rate actually went up from 3.34 to 3.82 for non-brand desktop. Well, again, that really mirrors more closely the 2.5 average position versus the 2.3. So again, there is some change before and after the 4-pack, what I'm calling the 4-pack, the 4 ads, but it's really nothing disproportionate from normal position shifts. And again, on the last example on the top right, we saw average click-through rate fall just a tad from 7.43 to 7.5. Again, it's nothing spectacular. It's in line with the average position changes, and it's back to the idea of only 6 maybe out of every 100 organic clicks will be impacted. Decided if you wanted to really get into the beyond the averages, let's look at the ultimate level of detail. You remember I predicted that positions 1, 2, and 3 wouldn't be impacted too much unless they really ended up picking up the traffic from 4, 5, and beyond that I expected would decline based upon screen height. What I did was I pulled the actual query-by-query information from the search query report, and I said, show me everywhere where both position 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they didn't change at all. What's my click-through rate then versus now? And you see the change actually reflects our hypothesis, which is that we lost a tiny bit of click-through on number 1. Number 2 and number 3 actually picked up just a tad bit of click-through rate, and number 4, 5, and beyond saw a proportionate amount of loss on click-through rate. So you could do the same with your data, but the overall message is that consider this as, when you think of organic, it's a slice of a slice of a slice, and if you're going to have anything negatively impacted, it's going to be your 4 and beyond for non-brand phrases, and it's highly likely that your 2 and your 3 and of course your number 1 ranking will become that much more important. So Val, do you have some last thoughts?
Wrapping up, remember there's only been a little over 2 weeks since this change has happened. Key takeaways now are intended to help enable some optimization without any major shifts in strategy. Long-term strategies and areas of focus will be determined by Search Dynamics in the coming weeks, so we'll be watching them closely. But what we do know is that integrating all of the SERP features, and by that I mean local, content, SEO, social, and paid, will be a crucial step and maybe an operating principle for most. Thank you so much for your time today, and I think we have some time for questions.
We do. Thanks so much, Val. We have a couple of questions that come in, and I will go ahead and ask them to you. The first question that came in is why would we expect branded search keywords to be more competitive? Val, can you take a second and answer that?
Absolutely. So initially, brands may benefit from this change given their relevance and ad rank on their brand and brand plus keywords. But if you take a brand like Elizabeth Arden, who has an e-commerce website, but yet they have affiliate partners and they have retail partners, brand and brand plus, and where those affiliate and retail partners are often shown up on the right-hand side, they need to fight for those top positions. So they're going to be willing to pay a premium not to lose that traffic. So it's just something we want to make sure we watch. We think initial findings are that our brands are benefiting a little bit, but it is something we're going to want to watch as that sacred territory could be at risk given that right-hand side impression loss.
Great, thanks, Val. Got another couple of questions that came in. One is Google changing how many ads appear on page 2 or more pages in SERPs?
In paid search or overall? So in ads, from an ad perspective, all of the press and anything that they've announced is that it's going to be consistent from page to page, the same amount on top and bottom. So we don't expect there to be any major changes, but again, they say they are still making tweaks, so we do expect tweaks to happen on both how they serve ads as well as what algorithm will allow it to serve.
It does remind me of one of my favorite jokes, though, that if you'd ever like to hide a dead body, put it on the second page of Google search results, because no one ever goes there.
And a follow-up question to that is whether or not Google will continue to show business listings on the right area of the SERPs. Do we know that?
We don't know for sure. This is Clay, and I don't expect it to impact anything because, number one, that is valuable from a user experience point of view. And specifically, those are served when there's a brand search or a locality-based search. So nothing they do, they want to sacrifice user experience. Again, I will say that we don't have any conclusive data on that, though. But it actually leads me to a segue, which is the larger question of what will Google do with that right rail real estate, meaning perhaps they will begin to include more knowledge graph results or more local business information. But they've recently begun testing some things like what they're calling local business cards right now, which are kind of like branded content cards that are being inserted. They're testing things like Google Home Services ads where they have an Angie's List type listing that's locality based with a star rating, etc. They're even doing some things for presidential candidates where they have branded content or kind of contextual content placements from political parties. I think that they're not only going to continue using the right rail for local, but if we're going to see anything, it's going to be experimentation with other ad types within that space. Perhaps it's PLAs, perhaps it's some space for these new kind of contextual content placements. And ultimately, we have to think of Google's philosophy and what we're seeing, which is that all things are mobile, meaning right now the user experience between Google Desktop and mobile search is very different. This is one step towards clearing that right rail and making desktop more like mobile. So this may be a nod towards the ultimate future, which is back to one Google experience that leans mobile rather than desktop. Long answer to a short question.
No, that was great. Thanks so much. I don't think we have any other questions at this time. But if you do have a question and you didn't get a chance to ask it, feel free to either reach out to your contact here at PM Digital or Paradise, or feel free to send an email to us at info@pmdigital.com. We are just about out of time. We hope you enjoyed the event. We look forward to seeing you at any future seminar. Again, if you have any questions, let us know, reach out. We will be sending out a follow-up email with the presentation as well as the recording. And again, hope you have a great day. Thanks.